as I took over was to really flush out the ways in which we are multi-faith so that we can read from a Christian theologian, but do so from, in this case today, an Islamic liberation perspective. And Iskander Abbasi is one of the most gentle and thoughtful and present people I have had the pleasure to get to know. And I am so thrilled that he is our fellow. And I believe we are getting on as well today. June Wink herself. I'm not sure if she's been able to get into the meeting yet. We're working on that, but we should get a chance to say hello to her. So before I turn it over to Iskander, um, he's a lecturer in the theology department at Fordham University. He does a lot of things. Teaches classes in theology, Islamic studies, religion, and ecology, and approaches his faith from a liberation theology lens, which is in so many ways both profound and revolutionary, and that is so much of how I think about Walter Wink's work and legacy. So as you all probably know, we're meeting today on March 19th, and then we'll meet again on April 16th, May 21st, and June 18th to go through different chapters. And with that, I am thrilled to hand it over to and to learn from Iskander.
Hello. Can folks hear me all right?
Yeah.
We can.
Nice, nice. Okay, I'm sure it's going to take all of us a bit of easing into this environment and getting used to the Zoom setting for the next 4 sessions. Um, but yeah, welcome everyone. This is our Powers That Be book club, sponsored by the Fellowship of Reconciliation and the Walter Wink and June Keener Wink Fellowship, which I happen to be a part of for this year and the next. Thank you all for being here. Um, my name is Iskander. And yeah, I'd like to just start with acknowledging, and expressing a bit of a gratitude to the Fellowship of Reconciliation and the Wink Fellowship for making this book club possible. And also to recognize June Keener Wink, who is with us on this call today, or she may still be trying to get onto the call. I'm not sure. Um, yeah, I'm very excited to begin this journey with you all for the next 4 sessions. Um, yeah, there is a few things, we can start with, but I guess just to share a bit with you all about myself before jumping into the text and themes that we're dealing with. I mean, I am a lecturer at Fordham University. I work in Islamic Studies, as as Ariel mentioned. I work primarily within Islamic Liberation Theology. I do work a bit on Islamophobia Studies, environmentalism in Islam. My PhD was on this notion of environmental stewardship in the Quran, and the concept of stewardship and the earth in the way that Muslim environmentalists are using it. I primarily come from a background of activism in Palestine solidarity. I am born and raised in Los Angeles, of a bit of a mixed background, one side being Arab, the other side being white. And I have engaged social justice in many ways throughout my life through a multi-faith lens, So I'm going to be bringing that perspective to our book club for the next 4 sessions. I lived for the last 10 years in South Africa, I went there to do my PhD in a bit of Islamic seminary training, and also was involved in the Palestine solidarity movement there. Of course, we're in very difficult times right now. All of us should be saying a bit of a prayer for those suffering in Gaza and elsewhere and in this country. Um, there is a prayer I'd like to start with. It's an Islamic prayer, but it's kind of very universal. And it's a nice one that I've been saying almost daily during Ramadan. And it's known as the prayer of light. There's two prayers I'll share. This first one is this prayer known as the prayer of light. And it goes, "O God, place light in my heart, light in my tongue, place light in my hearing, place light in my eyesight, place light behind me and light in front of me, place light above me and below me. O Allah, O God, grant us light." It's always beautiful to bring light into the picture, as I'm seeing all of your lights shine in joining. So welcome to those who are continuing to come in. There's this other prayer, though, that I think, I say this not just to start our meeting, but these are prayers for the Islamic holy month of
I
Ramadan,
don't think
uh,
so.
in
Let
which
me
we are
take a look.
currently in.
I have
But I think it also
something
applies to
now.
another month of fasting that
Um,
many of us may be going.
yeah,
I apologize, Iskander. I had too many. What if you could unmute yourself?
I just unmuted. Are okay?
take him away.
Okay, so I share these prayers, for this month of fasting, that all of us are going through, or many of us may be going through from our respective faith traditions. I was sharing with my students last week or the week before, the word for the Lent fast for Arab Christians is the same word that we use in Arabic, Sawm. And Sawm al-Kabir, the big fast, is the name for Lent amongst Arab Christians. So this prayer is for all of us engaging in those forms of fasting. Oh God, we come to you weak and with a broken heart. Mend our affairs and heal our hearts. Oh Allah, oh God, bless us in Ramadan and Lent and make it a month of transformation and growth in our lives. O God, O Allah, increase us in our closeness to you and fill our hearts with faith and contentment. O God, assist us in observing this fast and standing in prayer, and make us amongst those whom you free from the hellfire. O God, we are in need of you, so do not leave us to ourselves, even for the blink of an eye. Amen. Ameen. Okay, so to get us started, we're going to be dealing a lot with a text for the next 4 sessions. And well, of course, it's a book club, you can't really escape the text in a book club. There will be other ways I bring in other things to enliven the experience outside of just engaging the mind and textual stuff. So I'd like to start this our book club with a song. So if you give me a moment, and I'm sure many of you are likely familiar with this song, especially if you were around in the 80s. Okay, let me bring this to sharing my sound. I think you can all see my desktop now, right? Yeah, okay. It's like when people see your desktop, you feel naked. Oh my gosh, what are they gonna see? Okay. So I'm gonna get this going. Please just let me know if the sound comes out, okay? The name of this song is called The Powers That Be, and it's by Roger Waters. Uh, Feel free to adjust the sound on your end as well, okay? the powers that be, the powers that be, the powers that be, the powers that be. Of course, this song is by Roger Waters. I'm curious if this song brought back any memories for any of our participants. Possibly, I see a few no's, maybe a few nods of the head. Okay. It's technically not from my lived era, but I did grow up. I'm born in 1990, but I did grow up with a lot of my parents' music. One very interesting thing I'm encountering with Generation Z is they don't grow up with their parents' music, which is very weird for me. Roger Waters is, of course, a fierce advocate for social justice. He's been very, very vocal about the Palestinian cause, about corruption and injustice inside the United States across many different movements. And his song, The Powers That Be, I don't know, I think it can possibly serve as a bit of a sonic background to the sessions that we'll have the next few months. I did share the lyrics for those who may be interested. In many ways, the lyrics of the song relate to the way that Walter Wink himself has conceptualized the powers that be. Okay, so I am in this session going to spend about the first half just kind of introing us to the text, generally to the text and the life of Walter Wink and June Keener Wink. And then in the second half, we will be jumping into the introduction and chapter 1. So that will be the general layout of what's happening today. And I am going to take a bit of time, if you'll allow me, in this first session, just to kind of talk about not only what we're reading, but maybe what are some good ways of approaching reading that may seem silly at first, especially given that I'm amongst people who I'm sure are far more well-read than me, and you know, who've been around and are my elders, and I'm sure could be sharing with me the same, if not much better advice. But I do think it's helpful, you know, when you start a new group, how do we start to build kind of a shared foundation so that as we kind of start to enter the home, check out this room, go to this room, take a break in the bathroom. Okay, now we're in the kitchen. Eventually, we might get the roof going by the end. You know, we need to build some solid foundation. So I will spend a bit of time just sharing some ways I have found it helpful to approach reading, you know, in my journey. We have so far about 50 participants. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so let's get started with the text that we're dealing with. I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint, and we'll work through a few slides on that PowerPoint in relation to the Powers That Be book. And then we will move on to the actual text of the Powers That Be, and I will be sharing this on my screen. Please feel free to follow on the screen, or if you do have a physical copy in front of you and that's easier for you, you know, feel more than welcome to be engaging in that way. In due time, I think we'll figure out how each of us feels comfortable, you know, referring to the text and getting to know each other. So, okay, I'm going to move to sharing. Back to my desktop. Here we go. Okay. We have a PowerPoint here. Let me get this going. Okay. Can folks just confirm that they can see the PowerPoint all right? I'm not able to see anyone if they're giving a thumbs up. So whoever can speak, can you just say, yes, we see it?
Yes,
Yes, we see
it.
it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, we see it.
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so here we are, the Powers That Be Book Club. Welcome everyone. Ahlan wa sahlan, bienvenidos a todas o todos. Of course, we've shared that this book club is sponsored by the Fellowship of Reconciliation and the Wink Fellowship. Who are Walter Wink and June Keener Wink? I'm sure many of you know them much better than me, but here they are. You know, if June started the conversation with us, this is a picture from when Walter was still alive. May God bless his soul. A bit about Walter Wink. You know, it's always helpful to contextualize the author as you're approaching a text. His name was, of course, Walter Wink. He was born in 1935 in Dallas, Texas, and passed away just over 10 years ago in where both Walter and June have spent the latter half of their lives in Massachusetts. In terms of where Walter was based throughout his life, he was primarily based in the city of New York at Union Theological Seminary and then Auburn Theological Seminary, where he served as a professor of biblical interpretation. He was a visiting professor at various institutions, seminaries, and universities alike across the United States and internationally. The social movements and activism that he was a part of. He was very active throughout his life in civil rights, peace movements, and social justice advocacy. He was a prominent proponent of nonviolent resistance against systemic injustice. He stood up for the rights of LGBTQ plus folks in Christianity, and he was a major critic of militarism and economic oppression, both inside the United States and globally. A bit about June Keener Wink. As I'm sure many of you know, she's well known for being a visual artist, a potter, a dancer, and a spiritual practitioner who, in many ways, integrated the creativity aspect to the theological and social justice themes. I mean, that she gauged, you know, in her own life and in her own ways, but also alongside Walter, whom she collaborated with in his work on nonviolence, spirituality, and systemic justice, bringing her own flavor of an artistic and embodied dimension to their shared vision. In part, you know, I shared and started with a song because there are so many different ways to learn. There are so many different ways to share. And, you know, some of us are audiovisual learners, some of us are oral or oral learners. And I will do my best, you know, in the capacities that we have to engage these different forms in our book club together. June herself was involved in art and spirituality, exploring the intersection of the arts and Christian spirituality, particularly through movement and visual expression. She was also a proponent of nonviolent activism, focusing on peace, civil rights, and gender equality. And she also put forward a feminist and embodied theology, contributing to discussions on the body, dance, and creative expression as means of spiritual transformation and liberation. So that's a bit about our author and June. What about Walter Wink's larger repertoire or pedigree? In many ways, that's what informs the text we're dealing with today. So, on that theme of the powers and social justice, his first book on this was called Naming the Powers, The Language of Power in the New Testament, which came out in 1984. The second was Unmasking the Powers, The Invisible Forces That Determine Human Existence, which came out in 1986. And then the third in this trilogy is called Engaging the Powers, Discernment and Resistance in a World of Domination, which came out in 1992. Now, the text that we're dealing with in this book club is called The Powers That Be, Theology for a New Millennium, and it came out in 1998, and it was a popular level synthesis of his pre-existing Powers trilogy, making his ideas more accessible to a wider audience. Walter was a scholar of the New Testament and the Bible, and in many ways, this idea around the powers comes from his early career research around the notion of the principalities and powers. He looked at these, a number of the ways that these terms are used in the New Testament, going to Greek, So if I'm not mistaken, there was maybe 10 or so, could be less, um, terms that he looked at in the New Testament, kind of analyzing what does this word powers mean in Greek. So that was kind of the beginning of his enterprise. But then reinterpreting it, for purposes of his own arguments. Um, it's like when you get into this textual interpretation and linguistic stuff. In my PhD, for example, I looked at two words for much of the PhD. This idea of stewardship, which is translated in Arabic, it's khilafa, okay, which is often translated as caliphate. So it deals with kind of the political dimensions of governance, but it can also deal with this idea of stewardship in governance or in the environment. And then I looked at this other word, just one word, al-ard, which sounds very similar in Hebrew when you go to the New Testament, Eretz, Eretz Israel. Yeah, I mean, you can go really deep into what is just the earth, in the Quran or in the Bible. I share a few of the other works, of Walter Wink here. He had a number of works on Jesus, nonviolence, and spirituality, and some other works looking at Bible study, Gnosticism, as well as homosexuality in Christianity. The powers that be, the main text that we're dealing with in our book club, the text, sorry. It has some key themes, okay? So we'll just briefly look at these key themes and a bit of a summary of each. For me, I find it helpful as I approach a text to just, how do we feel it out? How do we see the larger picture before we zero in on some of those, more particular points? So overall, we'll get into this first one today. There's this big idea around the powers as spiritual and structural realities, and how these powers are real forces embedded in institutions shaping human life for good or possibly for evil. Another big concept and theme that we'll look at over the 4 sessions is this idea of the domination system. We're going to deal with it more specifically in our next session in April. But Walter Wink has a very specific way that he looks at this thing that he calls the domination system, and he has a claim that it's about 5,000 years old, and in many ways is characterized by patriarchy, economic exploitation, war, and authoritarian control. The third kind of major theme that comes out overall in this book is this is Jesus, if we can just say it simply, Jesus's approach to nonviolence and what Walter Wink describes as his third way. Okay, so I think we start to get into that into our next session, but definitely into the third as well. A part of all of this, of course, is, kind of unmasking, the fourth theme here and redeeming the powers. What do we do as we try to understand what the powers are, how to approach them? And then another big one that I put down here was this idea of prayer as a political act, so prayer not just being this personalist, devotional, pietistic thing, but prayer as an act of defiance and disobedience towards those out there, the pharaohs and the Death Eaters that in our times are need to be challenged. So yeah, these are kind of a bit of an overview of the major themes and that we're dealing with and looking at the powers that be overall. Okay, why don't we jump to the text? Okay, so before that though, what do I mean? Practically, I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint and I'm going to jump to sharing my copy of the text, which I have here in digital form. When we approach texts, I find it helpful to feel your text. Go on a journey with it. Make friends with it. get into fights with it, question it, walk with it, struggle with it. And when and if necessary, cheat on it, okay? Go to other texts and resources that may help you to understand it better. All of this, I think, helps one to feel more comfortable and confident in getting into the deeper analysis, whether critical or creative, that one does when they reflect and engage a text. So I'm going to stop sharing this here, and I'm going to jump to our. I'm going to jump here now to our PDF. Okay. Okay, folks can see the PDF, okay? Maybe Susan, you can just confirm for me?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, cool. So I'm assuming a number of you will have a physical copy. I'm assuming a number of you will have a digital copy. So here we are, looking at, feeling, starting to approach our text. Here's the front cover, the powers that be. We have the back jacket here with a number of comments of praise and endorsement. There's a nice picture of Walter there and a breakdown of his background that we covered a bit earlier. Okay. We have a little bit of a further breakdown of some of his works for those who may be interested. I also assume that there are people in this book club that have never encountered Walter Wink, so for those of you who have kind of dealt with his work for some time, please do hold tight. We're speaking to a number of different folks in this audience. Okay. Galilee Doubleday is the publisher. I think it's a subsidiary of Random House, may still be around. One thing that I found interesting here, it's always kind of a big thing when we deal with translations of the Quran as well. It does note which Bible was sourced for the translations and excerpts that that Wink dealt with. So it came from this version here, the New Revised Standard Version Bible. In many books in Islamic studies, folks often clarify in the beginning as well which translation of the Quran you used, because every time you translate a text, inevitably there's a form of interpretation that comes. I think we're going to see how that happens when Wink looks at these notions of the powers and how to translate them from Greek. But this can definitely come up when you deal with, the Hebrew in the Old Testament or or Arabic in the Quran. So that's always a good one to know when you are approaching a text dealing with religion. There's, of course, a beautiful quote to June here, and there is only dance. By the famous author and poet T.S. Eliot. There's a bit of a preface, which we will pass today. And here we are with our table of contents. Okay, so for me, when I approach a text, this may seem silly at first, but if I feel tired, annoyed, or overwhelmed, I will literally just look at the page numbers and see how many pages are in each chapter. And that process for me chills me out. It kind of relaxes me. Okay, I'm overwhelmed just thinking about what this text may be about. I'm overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, I have to read 2-3 chapters for the next book club. How do I do this? How do I break it down? Well, let's break it down, Okay, chapter 1, it starts at page 13. Between chapter 1 and 2, we're looking at around 25 pages. All right. Chapter 2 here is around kind of a little bit over 20 as well. In chapter 3, we're looking at just under 20 pages. Chapter 4 is about 15 pages long. Chapter 5, again, between 15 to 20. And you can kind of, count on your own to see if you find this kind of practice helpful. But the rest of the chapters, for the most part, are between 15 to 25 pages. So, as I prepare myself for this book club, this is something that I may do just to get myself more comfortable and see how can I break this down as I read it. We move along from the table of context. We come to, the main body now. I'm just going to slowly, not slowly, but kind of scroll through a bit of this text, okay? You'll start to see that I have comments. These little air bubbles that come up on the side. I have a lot of the text that I begin to highlight of different points that I found kind of interesting or striking, relevant on my end for purposes of a book club. But generally, what's really kind of poking at you when you read. I think this is a very helpful way to approach a text. Whether you have a physical copy and you're going about this with a marker or a pen, or you have your digital copy and you're doing your own highlighting, you'll see that this is a nice way of going about making friends with your text, questioning it, walking with it. How do we get to deeper levels of meaning? Okay, and you can see I do this process kind of in the chapters that we're engaging. On the side here, for those who do use Adobe and they have this feature, you can see a lot of this commentary that comes along as we read. For myself, this commentary here, it kind of goes until about the second chapter, and all of this commentary that I made here was just on my first reading. So if you want to give yourself a framework for what to expect, this may be one model for yourself. How can I know that I'm practically engaging this text? You have your highlighter, you have your pen, you have the click of your button to highlight and to make comments. That's what I hope may be a helpful way for us to approach this text for purposes of this book club. Here we are. Hi, how are you, Tex? Nice to meet you. Lovely to meet you. We're going to be together for the next 4 months. Okay, nice, nice. I even do funny things like this, folks. I just look and I scroll through the text. I see what's happening in each chapter, each section. What are the subtitles? What are the subheadings? All of that just lets me get a better understanding of what's going on before I go into a more specific or particular reading. And I'll even go through the whole document. I mean, I'm not going to put us through such a boring exercise this time around, but you can see you can do this throughout the whole text. And of course, when you get to the end, we have the nifty feature of an index and being able to look up key terms, okay, that come up that you can always refer back to. Okay, so we have this here in our text. Nonviolence, Judeo-Christian ideas, the domination system. These are all things you can always find by looking in the index. Yes, someone left a comment here. In other words, reading strategically rather than just in a linear way. Anytime, it's like, I think I learned how to swim just by jumping in. I was about 3 years old and I started drowning. That's a true story. Okay, sometimes it's nice and fun to learn that way, but often it's good to learn how to swim, before you just jump in. So I hope folks may have found that relevant. Okay, so we have our text, we have approaching our text. Let's jump into our text. I stopped sharing, right? Okay. I am going to first go through a bit of the introduction with you all and kind of show a bit of my own particular reading and how I'm going through approaching and feeling and touching this text. And then we will jump to chapter 1, and we'll have a few selections that I'm going to ask folks to read through in answering some questions I provide. that's just so you know kind of what's coming. But for now, we will jump back to the introduction. I'm going to pull it up again. Okay, here we are. Let me come back to the beginning. Okay. Okay, so the introduction. Aside from what I already shared in those initial slides around the general themes that we're going to encounter, all of that is definitely a part of the introduction. What are some other things, when I was actually reading this text in a more linear way that popped out at me? What was my first comment here? Okay. Great weaving in of stories into his intellectual framework. That's something that I really enjoyed in reading this text, was Wink's approach of bringing in stories from his life and examples from real life that illuminate and make more logical kind of the theoretical and abstract arguments that he puts forward. That's something that I find always helpful, especially when you're speaking to a less technical audience. At an early point, as I was reading this, I mean, just on the second page, I said, okay, and this was on my first reading, folks. I started to ask, what are the powers? Who are the powers? The powers, can they be good? Can they be evil? And then I had this other funny question about what's with the potential moralizing of power? And that made me think back to some debates that were happening in the lead up to the last presidential election, particularly within Palestine solidarity, and how people, looked at this question of, Harris versus Trump, or previously Biden versus Trump, and the lesser of two evils, or the two evils, or what's going on, good person versus bad person. Is this the most helpful way for approaching politics? I'm not sure. That's a thought that came to my mind as I was reading this text. We can maybe come back to it at another time. As I went down in my reading, okay, and now I have a bit more of my theological thinking cap on by the time I get to page 3. What critiques are emerging here? He starts talking about individualism, materialism, the question of free will versus predestination. When we spiritualize these powers that he's talking about and their effects on us, how is it coming out? Are they omnipotent? Are they immanent? These are kind of key terms that are often used in theology. I have some highlighted text here. As he's talking about his conceptualization of the powers, he refers to Jewish and Christian sources, wherein he discovered that the ancient sages believed that everything in creation has its own angel. That means, or that meant, Wink says, I concluded that everything has both a physical and a spiritual aspect. The powers that be are not then simply people and their institutions, as I had first thought. They also include the spirituality at the core of these institutions and structures. If we want to change those systems, we will have to address not only their outer forms, but their inner spirit as well. So even before Wink starts to get into all these more technical ways of defining the powers, we can see in the intro, this is starting to come, the powers that be, it's an internal, it's an external. In Islam, we have this idea of what's apparent, the zahir, versus what's internal, the batin, okay? And angels, this idea of angels kind of being everywhere in reality. What does that mean? What does Wink mean by that? It's fascinating. Um, okay, he starts talking about corporations and corporations when they take form, the big ones like IBM or General Motors. Are these things just innocent free enterprise? Are they just innocent business doing their thing in the so-called free market? Or is there actually a spiritual thing happening in these massive conglomerates of power? In many ways, the market, the so-called free market, also has a religion. Its expression might be this exchange of values, of goods and services, of the trade of commodities, but we kind of know when you look at the basic definition of capitalism that the value placed on markets is profit at all costs and socially exploitation of the other. If you want to look at that from the perspective of patriarchy, there's a gender dimension there. If you want to look at it from the perspective of race, who gets exploited? More often than not, it's people of color and third world peoples. The question of the environment, the source of all wealth, the earth. What's happening there when the market is unrestrained and supposedly free? I think Wink suggests there is a deep spiritual dimension to this, and not just a sociological one. Okay, so further on, you can see here on page 5 that he says there are limits when we talk about these social and structural entities only from a sociological point of view. We have to also discuss it from a theological and a spiritual point of view. So many of us, I think, identify as leftist. But, and many of you know this much better than me, you've been in the game much longer than myself. If we are coming from that faith-based perspective, at times we find it difficult with our comrades when they don't approach these social issues from a faith-based perspective. You know, if it's just kind of a crass, completely atheistic Marxism or a crass, completely atheistic economic reductionism of how things are happening in the structure or the superstructure. I don't know if it speaks to the entirety of what's happening to us as humans or in terms of non-human creation and the values that are speaking, literally from the personhood of a corporation, the personhood of a military industrial complex, the personhood of a war machine, okay? These are things that Wink starts to point out, and in my own reading, makes me kind of think. There's a nice story that he shares here about him and June traveling to Latin America. Can I possibly ask one of you to read this passage here? Susan, might you be? I don't know if folks want to raise a hand, and then Susan can kind of pick someone.
I would like to nominate Wayne Ewan, who called in today, very much excited to participate. Wayne, would you like to read the passage? Wayne, if you could unmute, there we go.
Anyway, I wanted to look at the demonic extreme of military dictatorship. So with all these ideas marinating in my mind, my wife June and I went to Chile on a sabbatical leave in 1982 to observe the dictatorship of General Augusto Pinochet firsthand. Afterward, we traveled through South and Central America, staying in barrios and favelas, talking with priests and nuns who were struggling for human rights and political freedom. We spoke with a lawyer who represented the families of people who had been disappeared, as they put it. We spent an excruciating evening in dialogue with a woman who had been tortured. And so it went, week after week.
Thank you very much, Wayne. So here we encounter the personal story coming from Walter and June's life of the way in which they lived and attempted to live out liberation theology. One of the main tenets of liberation theologies is this idea of choosing to be in solidarity with the oppressed and the marginalized. The fancy term is a preferential option for the poor and the oppressed. This is a term that's used, kind of across the board in Christian liberation theology, Jewish liberation theology, Islamic liberation theology. And it's important, it's important. And in certain ways, it may present a bit of a critique, of some of the dominant ways, at least in the last 15 years, people have approached things like identity politics, wherein, it's like you can only be from the oppressed identity in order for you to have the authenticity to now engage in social justice. I'm not so sure, I'm not so sure that that's what this idea is about in liberation theology. In many ways, I think liberation theology presents an approach which is not about identity politics, but about our identities in politics. Okay? So, you don't have to be a Palestinian, Muslim, or Christian from Gaza to stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza and Palestine in this moment. You do have to kind of educate yourself. You do have to put yourself out there humbly, I myself don't come from the African American community, but I wanted to be involved in Black Lives Matters over 10 years ago. So I went on an interfaith delegation when I was in grad school in Boston. We drove halfway across the country to visit the site where Mike Brown was martyred in Ferguson. We went, Muslims, Jews, Christians, peoples of other backgrounds, black, brown, white, yellow, the whole gamut. And we went to listen. We went to hear. We went to bear witness. We went to learn. We went to advocate. Ultimately, what we took from this experience, aside from in the moment standing in solidarity in Ferguson and seeing the tanks come out and seeing how the community was in shambles, and we had to bring that experience back now to our own context, our own homes, our own communities, to fight with the tools that we have. This is an important part of liberation theology and the life of Walter Wink and this text. There's a few other ways that kind of dynamic comes out that I'll just point out quickly, because I do want to wrap up our time in the introductory chapter. But he shares, his experience in South Africa and how his visits to South Africa were also very influential in the way that he came to understand the powers, in the way that he came to understand nonviolence. So that's one thing I find very intriguing and curious, in Wink's approach to the powers that be. In the beginning of this talk, I don't think that I clarified how much time we're dealing with. So right now, we've technically, we started at 4:30 and it's almost 5:30. So generally, we'll have our sessions for at least an hour and 15. And I, for the most part, I don't like lecturing, especially over lecturing and talking too much. So in the 4 sessions, there will be a lot more time for more kind of communal engagement and other folks bringing in their insights and knowledge. I'll also make sure to have a break. But given that we did start a bit later and we're dealing with more introductory stuff, if folks can bear with it for today, I am going to skip the break, but I will replace it with something that is, kind of less me talking. Okay. So here we are with chapter 1, okay? I'm going to stop sharing the PDF and I'm going to jump to our our PowerPoint again. That's not it. Okay, here we are. We have the PowerPoint. Okay, can folks see this all right? It says chapter 1, pages 13 to 20, and there is a couple of questions asked there. You can see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what I want to ask folks to do right now, just to kind of open up a bit of space for interaction, I want to ask you to take, kind of the next 5 to 10 minutes to reread this section here, pages 13 to 20, and to ask yourself these questions. What type of theological worldview does Wink maintain? Is he coming from a predestinarian or fatalist background? Is he pushing this idea of free will? Does he highlight God's utter transcendence over that of God's immanence? What does he call his approach to conceptualizing God and the cosmos? Yeah, is that clear? We can just take about 5 to 10 minutes now. Give it a quick review. If you feel comfortable writing this down to yourself, please do. You can put it into the chat, and we can read it from the chat. Or when we open it up for answering this question, you can also share orally. Okay, I'm hoping that's clear. If it is not for anyone, please do feel free to ask. I cannot immediately see people. Folks finding the reading and questions all right? I can see you now. I did stop sharing. I did also want to acknowledge the presence, I forgot to earlier, of someone who's been a big inspiration to myself and maybe many others here, but Sheikha or Ustada Rabia Harris is on the call with us, and in many ways she is, I mean, she kind of started all of this around Islam, you know, in the question of nonviolence and peace. So we just want to kindly acknowledge you, Ustada.
How do we get a copy of the book? I couldn't go to the, I went to the library, neither of them had it.
FOR would be happy to send you a copy of the book. If you want to email, I'm going to put the email in the chat. If anyone is unable to get the book, let us know. We would be happy to see that you have the book, and you can email us at info, INFO, at forusa.org.
Also, any towns that have half-price books sometimes have it available.
I do have a digital copy in the case you didn't already have one, Ariel, for sharing.
That would be wonderful. I am not sure if we did, so that would take care of it.
Okay, cool. I will send you one.
I'm looking on eBay because we try and avoid Amazon, and I'm seeing it for as cheap as $3.76. And there are quite a number of copies.
I use abebooks.com, ABE, abebooks.com, and they have it for about that same price.
Okay, do folks feel like they've had some good time to review that part and think through that question? Yeah? Okay, yeah, I mean, we can work through at least 2 or 3 of folks' response. Would anyone like to share orally? You can repeat the question as well. But basically, I mean, it's what's happening. What type of theological worldview does Wink put forward here? How does he deal with this question of, let's say, free will versus fatalism? What does he highlight in God's nature? Is it transcendence? Is it immanence? There's a whole discussion here about different worldviews. What does he call the approach? What did folks find? I mean, we have kind of the easy answer that folks immediately replied with. Wayne shared it, Ladorna.
Johnson Reynolds has his hand up.
Awesome, go for it.
Yeah, I would say immanence that moves towards transcendence. Immanence where you're relating to the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized, and the diversity of them. I mean, the Poor People's Campaign is trying to do that right now. And interaction and listening and hearing the hurt, and then being in solidarity to work with the people that are experiencing the hurt to overcome the hurt. and in specific places. But we're trying to do that in San Rafael and Marin County, north of San Francisco, with MOC, Marin Organizing Committee, relating to the Board of Supervisors and the city councils to provide a living wage for caregivers, affordable housing and homelessness work, and students who need counseling. So those are the kind of things we're doing.
Nice, nice. Thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds, for sharing. Others want to share their insights? There is this one that Wayne and Ladorna immediately put in the chat, this idea of the integral worldview, you know, kind of looking at reality and the cosmos as something that is living and breathing and deeply interconnected. You know, an injury to one is an injury to all, is a nice protest chant that may get at that theological kind of worldview. You know, the fancy terms that people use to describe the unintegral or the anti-integral worldview in the development of Western thought is Cartesian dualism. Okay, so you have, I mean, people I'm sure heard that phrase, "I think, therefore I am," by Rene Descartes in the 17th century. And many argue that this idea of the mind being separated from the body, right? And the body simply being a machine that the rational mind can now penetrate, you know, and control, led to a lot of the problems that we have in the world. The mind is kind of the masculine quality, the body being the feminine quality. So then the mind dominating the body is actually potentially a form of patriarchy, you know? Or if we're only talking about the mind and body, and now an ultimate creator or God has been excluded from the equation, what happens? You know, you look to Nietzsche, the death of God. What does that lead to? Complete secularism, complete secularization, secular meaning to cut off, you know, cut off from an integrated cosmos. These can create many problems in the world. John Reynolds, we just heard from Mr. Reynolds.
Jean Clark has her hand up.
She's muted.
Well,
Jean, we need you to unmute, please.
sorry. Yes, I believe that in this chapter, Wink definitely there's a lot of immanence and connection to the world because he says that there's a spiritual reality at the heart of everything. It's an amazing statement. And then he says that the world becomes what we think it is. So there's a process there, or it's kind of like the world is not static, but it's becoming what we think it is. And if we change our mind and our thinking, the world becomes a better place. So the connection of how we think and what is reality is amazing. And it reminds me of this, before this new science that we now know, it's already present in Wink. Because the spirituality, that everything is spirit and energy, is coming from the science now. So I find this very hopeful and yes, very much in the body, in the world, and yet the spirit, transcendence. And so there's no separation. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing, Ms. Jean Clark. I found what you said very profound. It made me think about, in my tradition in Islam, I mean, how do we work through the paradox of immanence and transcendence? Because they're both there. And in certain ways, they can be against each other or contradictory. So on one hand, there's this verse in the Quran that says literally that Allah, God, is closer to you than your jugular vein. God is very close to yourself, But at the same time, God is completely transcendent, The Islamic claim on monotheism, that God is utterly one and not dependent on anything in this reality, means in a way that God is like an ultimate other. So what do we do? What do we do with this ultimate other who's also seemingly so close to the self? And of course, putting that question into the context of reality and social justice. In my own journey, thinking through that from a liberation theology perspective, I find that the panentheist approach, which who mentioned it here? Ladorna mentioned panentheism. Okay. So panentheism, it's this idea of God not being only immanent in pantheism, but both immanent and transcendent. So God is a part of reality, but also far beyond. If God is the ultimate other in his transcendence, what does that teach us about the others of this reality? This ultimate other is our beloved. So those others in our times, the impoverished, those suffering domestic abuse, those forced onto the sidewalks to beg and to scavenge for food and for material survival. These others who have in fact been otherized, okay? Poverty is not a given. People are impoverished. If we are to love the ultimate other, would we not also love and be in solidarity with the others in our very society? That's one way I've attempted to think through this question, from a liberation theology perspective. Susan, I just want to check on time. Can we possibly push to another 15 minutes?
Well, that is fine with me. I would just like to share that Mitchell Ratner has his hand up. And also, we are just joined by June Wink, who is on the call. And she's actually been on the phone with me the entire time, but she wasn't unable to log in. So here she is. So maybe we will welcome June and then go to Mr. Ratner's question.
Hi, June.
I'll just add quickly, for anybody that can't extend their time and needs to leave, this is being recorded and it'll be on our YouTube and sent around. So if you do need to miss the rest of today, you can watch it later.
I don't know if I'm heard or not. I am heard. Okay. I'm so sorry that I'm coming in so late. I can't even believe that I'm here. But anyway, I am so thrilled that this is being discussed, and it's certainly the time of our country that we need to bring the powers back every minute of the day, because we are exposed to all these things that we didn't think they would ever happen. But when we were in Chile and all these places, it was like, it's good to be home. But when we got home, we were just so filled up with sadness of what we had experienced. Anyway, I'm not taking your time. I don't want to take your time. I just want to say hi to all of you. And thanks for being here. Iskander, thank you for leading this. That's it.
Thank you, June. It's a pleasure to have you in our presence. We're honored to have you here. We wouldn't be here without you.
I tried.
Okay. For purposes of time, I do want to kindly just cut this part of our answering the question short to get to one more question that we can end on in relation to this chapter. Apologies to Mr. Ratner. Let me pull up, okay, this last question. And I mean, this question in many ways breaks down the whole chapter, okay? And it will be similar to this last one, where we just do a little bit of reading of the text and then share our responses. Okay, and it's a much shorter reading, okay? So if you can turn your attention towards the end of chapter 1, which are pages 31 to 36, and review and reread them. You know, we can take another 5 minutes or so to do that and work through these questions. What is or are the natures of the powers? Are they inherently good, bad, ugly, or beautiful? Are they redeemable? Where and how do they take shape in our lives and current social contexts? I'll leave that up for a moment as people get going, and then we can return to the sharing. Give folks about another minute or so. Folks had some good time. Okay, I just got a message that our meeting is scheduled to end at 6. We've warned, and it's not something we can edit while in session. Um, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what to do with that. I might take the recommendation from our moderators. There are nice reflections folks are sharing here. I like the way it spoke so personally to people in terms of our own psychology and existence. Ralph Pittman shared, the powers are good, bad, ugly, and beautiful, and infinitely redeemable. Who was saying that's just like us? I was reading another one. Would you like to share, John?
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just to summarize sort of your question for this last little, before we leave, to summarize for myself, when I'm thinking about the powers, or what Wink was maybe trying to get across, was that they are essentially the soul of the world, the essence of all that is. It's just that, as we know now that matter is atoms just bouncing off of each other. Nothing is still, nothing is static. There's no such thing as a desk and an angel above a desk. There is the essence of everything. And if you take it all into consideration, the powers are sort of the summation of everything that is. The Tao. The Taoists called it the Tao. And if you can talk about the Tao, you're not talking about the Tao. I'm sorry, I'm sort of talking in circles, but that's
No,
the only way I can do it. I can picture that, and so I struggled. Sorry.
no, thank you for sharing, Uncle John. Sorry, in my culture, we refer to our elders as uncle and auntie. Um, uh, the Tao, I've always loved the picture of the Tao, the yin and yang.
Yang yang, exactly.
Because within yin, you always have to have a little bit of that yang, and within
And
yang,
that was an example that Wink used to sort of picture the powers in relation to everything else that's so-called solid, the structures and the powers that exist within.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. I just want to let people know there's about 30 seconds before we turn into a pumpkin and the screen goes off. So you're registered for the next meetings. Please tell your friends whether or not they've read the book to sign up. The more the merrier. You don't have to read the book, although we certainly encourage it. And final word.